Coming up in this episode of In Clear Focus.
As a brand, you've got the choices. You can do D2C, you can do third-party marketplace, you can do retail, you can do direct, so you can have your own shops. There's more opportunities to build the business that you want to build.
You're listening to In Clear Focus, fresh perspectives on the business of advertising, produced weekly by Big Eye, a strategy-led, full-service creative agency growing brands for clients globally. Hello, I'm your host, Adrian Tennant, Chief Strategy Officer. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to look at some of the founding stories and strategies of brands that have rewritten the rules of traditional retail and established dominant market positions by adopting the direct-to-consumer, or DTC, business model. Although many startups launch with e-commerce, few manage to successfully scale their DTC operations. A new book entitled The Direct-to-Consumer Playbook offers unique insights drawn from best-in-class DTC brands and is this month's featured selection for the Big Eye Book Club in partnership with Kogan Page Publishing. The Direct-to-Consumer Playbook's author is Mike Stevens. Mike served his entrepreneurial apprenticeship on the startup team at Innocent Drinks before co-founding the good-for-you confectionery and candy company Peppersmith. After scaling and selling Peppersmith, Mike now works as an advisor, mentor, and consultant of those seeking to enter the increasingly competitive DTC space. To discuss the direct-to-consumer playbook today, Mike is joining us from his home in Poole, England. Mike, welcome to In Clear Focus.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a bit about Innocent Drinks and what it was about working on that brand that inspired you to found Peppersmith?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really lucky to join Innocent right at the beginning of that particular business. For those of you who don't know, Innocent is now the biggest fruit juice company in Europe, so bigger than Tropicana, and now owned by Coca-Cola, so hugely successful business. When I first met Innocent back in 2001, it was a brand new startup. So little did I know that it was going to go on to be the success it has been. And I was very, very lucky to be part of that business in terms of rapid growth and learning a lot. But the main reason I joined Innocent is because it was a startup. And even, back in 2000s, outside tech, startups still weren't really a thing. The word startup and founder didn't really exist. But I always knew that I wanted to start my own business. So I joined Innocent because it was a startup operation. And I thought, what a great place that would be to learn what it's like being in a young business. And I was so glad I did because it ticked all the boxes and I learned so much. I mean, I always advise anyone who wants to start their own business, especially if they're young as well, go and work for a startup first, because you can see what happens, you can see the ups and downs, you can see the pressures and the different things that happen in a startup, which is very different from a 9-to-5 well-oiled corporate. And then you can see if you like it. But then also importantly, have you got the right skills, attitude and aptitude to prosper in an environment like that? And if you have, absolutely take those lessons and then you can start something for yourself. So that's what I was doing at Innocent, but that took me on to doing lots of different things, including Peppersmith.
Well, I mentioned in the intro that you took Peppersmith from concept through to acquisition. Was that what prompted you to write the direct-to-consumer playbook?
The motivation for writing the book came out of, some of the challenges we had in the business and the opportunities. But going back to the beginning, I started Peppersmith because I wanted to do my own thing. And what happened was at Innocent, we were sort of leading the food revolution. And what I mean by that is the major trends, which were, sort of spearheaded by the likes of Innocent and some other great food and drink brands out there with natural, healthy, sustainable products with a brand to tell the story in terms of why they're different from all the incumbent food and drink and on the shelf. And the insight that we had is that change was happening all over the food and drink industry. So in every category, whether it was ice cream or milk or bread or cheese, whatever, those trends were apparent apart from one category, and that was confectionery. So confectionery was still dominated by huge multinationals who'd been doing the same thing, not for years, not for decades, but some of them like hundreds of years, to the likes of Mars and Cadbury, Wrigley. These businesses have been around for a long, long time. And what they did very well. But essentially it was high volume, cheap, not very good for you crap. So we saw the opportunity to mix that up and take the trends we saw everywhere else. And so hypothesis was, if natural, healthy, sustainable was working in every other category, why shouldn't it work in confectionery? And we were right. So we built this brand. It was a good for you confectionery company that we made chewing gum, mints, other sugar-free sweets and candy. And we built that business over nearly 10 years and eventually exited in 2018. But to your question about why I wrote the book following my experience there, it really was about, the way we were selling our products. So right at the very start, when we launched the brand in 2010, we had a direct-to-consumer offer, which was you could go on our website, hit a PayPal button, and we would deliver you products directly to your home. But the reason we did that, it wasn't because we thought D2C was an amazing sales opportunity. We did it because we knew as a startup it was going to take us a long time to build up distribution, and we wanted to ensure that anyone who'd heard about us and wanted to try the product could, because we knew that we wouldn't be in every shop. So lots of people, if they went out and about, they might not find us. So we had this D2C offer. But as we grew, what we found was that our direct-to-consumer business was just growing organically. It was getting bigger and bigger without us putting a lot of effort into it. It also helped that we went onto Amazon very early on. We were in the UK, we were one of the first food products on Amazon. So that really helped us in terms of internet sales. So that part of the business was growing. And we were also having quite a lot of success in bricks and mortar retail distribution. So the big supermarkets, the main health food chains in the UK, lots of travel sites were taking the products. But the one thing that I'm sure is true, whether it's in Europe or the US or wherever, dealing with these big retail chains is incredibly hard work. They're very demanding. They don't always do what you want them to do as a supplier. And I guess as a small brand, we don't have all the resources to serve them as maybe they would like. Where we got to is that while we had generally a lot of success in retail, it was just getting harder and harder. And at the same time, D2C was growing and we weren't really trying. So yeah, we reached the point where it was like, well, if retail's getting harder and D2C seems to be pretty open and easy and it's growing and we're not even trying, why don't we put more effort into the thing that seems to be working, which was D2C? So we decided just to put more effort and resource into our direct-to-consumer channel. What I would say, by the time we sold the business in 2018, D2C and internet sales were about a third of the revenues. So the bulk of the business was still via retailers. But I think, getting to a third was quite impressive because we were making confectionery products, which people normally bought at front of store. So to sell in bulk as we were and via D2C, I think that was quite a good effort. So we grew that side of the business. But what always played on my mind is, what are the right things to be doing? Should we be investing more in marketing, or is it in operations? How do we think about pricing? And what I did, I was asking around my peer group of other founders who were all, we're all trying to do a bit of D2C. So it's probably 2014, 2015. And the answers pretty much from all of my founder peer group was, we're doing the basics, but we don't really know what we're doing. We're all sort of learning on the job. And that was the whole community. So us as a bunch of founders who own these great brands were trying to sell more and more using the power of the internet. We were all learning on the job. And my thought at the time was like, oh, I really wish I could just buy the book to tell me how to do this. But it didn't exist. I mean, it didn't exist, I guess, because this D2C selling was quite new, but then also just no one had got around to writing it. So when I sold the business in 2018 and finally stepped away from the brand in 2019, it occurred to me that no one's still written the book for brands in terms of the best practice to sell and direct to consumer. So because I had the time and I still had the motivation, and my main motivation was to help other entrepreneurs like myself, I thought I'd write the book. And so that's what I spent the last 2 years doing.
Well, you wrote most of the direct-to-consumer playbook during the COVID-19 lockdowns. In what kinds of ways did that change how you approached researching and writing the book?
Yeah, so that was quite a change. So I started in earnest really at the end of 2019, start of 2020. And I guess my strategy in terms of writing the book hadn't changed and didn't change. And that was going to meet with the founders or CEOs of the best D2C brands that I could find and interview and tell their story. So I did that. And when I first started, I was determined to go and meet face to face all of the founders. And that started. And then I think it was actually in February 2020, the first time I wanted to meet a founder, Tails.com, which is a D2C dog food company. And in their office, you can imagine the DTC dog food company, every day is a take your dog to work day. So there were dogs everywhere. But I've got quite a severe dog allergy. So I was trying to figure out how we navigate that. So I did have an interview with the founder sort of away from their office, but I had to follow up using Zoom because I couldn't go back and see him. And that was, I thought that was okay. And then the pandemic hit in March 2020, and what was amazing then, it meant that, yes, it was impractical for me to go and meet all of the founders. And I actually had to cancel some interviews that I already had lined up. But what really impressed me was how quickly everyone adapted. And doing a video call for 1 or 2 hours didn't seem such a strange thing. So it was actually, in the end, I think it was quite advantageous to me that I could ask people, are you happy to sit on a video call with me for a couple of hours to tell your story? And the answer was, yep, because that's what I do all day now. And secondly, it extended my reach. So I was able to find times that could fit with me and whoever I was interviewing, and also expand internationally. So there was Simon Griffiths from Who Gives a Crap in Australia. There was Jeff, the co-founder of Casper, Hugh, who did Ugly Drinks out of New York. So yeah, there was just lots more people who I could reach. And if I had to go and see them face to face, that would have been more difficult. So in the end, while it's always better to do face-to-face interviews, especially as you want to get a feel for actually what those businesses are all about, it was helpful in terms of writing the book.
Mike, what can readers expect to learn from the direct-to-consumer playbook?
Well, essentially, it is the stories and strategies of the best-in-class D2C companies. I think the stories are quite important in terms of where the founders come from, in terms of what their background was, what their mission was, what they're trying to achieve. But then out of those stories and out of the growth, the scaling stories of their business, it was me trying to pick out what are the things that those businesses have done so well that has enabled them to be successful. And the way I approached that, I just asked the founders all the things that I wanted to know as a founder. And I think that gave me a real advantage. I was asking questions which I think were probably quite different than a journalist would ask or an academic would ask. I was asking the questions which were keeping me awake at night. How did you approach this challenge that I faced every day? Whether that was a marketing question, that was a finance question, it was an operations question, it was a team, it was investment, it was all the things that all these businesses have to do, including us. And I think what that enabled me to do is actually, because I was a founder asking questions of another founder, it was easy to establish a rapport. I was so impressed with the answers and the time that the people I interviewed were able to give me. They just gave me some really powerful, honest, candid answers. And I just don't think that would be possible if I went in there as anything other than a founder.
Let's take a short break. We'll be right back after these messages.
I'm Dana Cassell, Big Eye's senior strategist. Every week, In Clear Focus addresses topics that impact our work as marketing professionals, often inspired by data points reported in consumer research studies. At Big Eye, we put audiences first. For every engagement, through our own research, we develop a deep understanding of our clients' prospects and customers, analyzing their attitudes, behaviors, and motivations. We distill this data into actionable insights to inspire creative brand building and persuasive activation campaigns with strategic, cost-efficient media placements. If you'd like to know more about how to put Big Eye's audience-focused insights to work for your brand, please contact us. Email info@bigeyeagency.com.
Each month, in partnership with our friends at Kogan Page, the Big Eye Book Club features interviews with authors who are experts in specific areas of marketing and consumer research. Our featured book for June is The Direct-to-Consumer Playbook, the stories and strategies of the brands that wrote the DTC rules, by Mike Stevens. In Clear Focus listeners can save 20% on a print or electronic version of the book with exclusive promo code BIGEYE20. This code is valid for all products and pre-orders and applies to Kogan Page's free ebook offer. To order your copy of the Direct-to-Consumer Playbook, go to koganpage.com. That's KOGANPAGE.com. Welcome back. I'm talking with Mike Stevens, an expert in scaling direct-to-consumer brands and the author of the Direct-to-Consumer Playbook, published by Kogan Page. In the book, you identify 7 characteristics shared by best-in-class direct-to-consumer brands. One of your recommendations for DTC brands is to build community. So Mike, why community building?
Community building is so important. And the reason it comes up again and again when we talk about D2C businesses is because D2C enables you to build a community. And the reason that happens is that every transaction you have, you're interacting with that end consumer. In terms of old school retailing, you've just got wholesalers, you've got distributors, you've got retailers in the way which separates the producer and the consumer. But now they have this connection. And as you connect with those customers, they find out about you. You find out about them, and you work out, which ones you have the most in common with. And the ones you have the most in common with become your people, and they become more than your customers. They're your supporters. They tell you what to do more of. They tell you what to fix. They buy everything you do, and they tell their friends to do the same. And they interact with each other as well as that community, and it's all built around who you are, what you offer, and what you care about. And if you can build that community, it's a powerful marketing tool, but it's a really powerful reason for being, because they're the set of people you're going to look after again and again.
You also write about purpose needing to be at the heart of every brand. Why is defining the why behind a business so important to DTC specifically?
When someone comes to you, whether it's via a social ad or they've been told about you, they end up on your website, they're looking for connection. They want to understand what you're about. And the reason having a purpose and standing for something is so important is that competition is so abundant. So customers really need to see what you do. And if they believe in the same things you believe in, they're going to become a customer, part of your community, become a friend of the business. And what this means, and this is quite important as we move on to internet away from mainstream retailing, is that because you care about something and you should be proud of sharing what you cared about, you're not going to please everyone. There's going to be a lot of people who come to your website and it's just not for them, and that's okay. But the important thing to remember is the ones that do come back because they believe in the same things you do, they're going to come back again and again and be with you all the way.
Here in the US, we've seen a lot of editorials recently predicting the end of the direct-to-consumer boom. Economics play a part. The social platforms that originally enabled relatively inexpensive advertising for startup brands have become more expensive in recent years. Distribution, too, is changing as many DTC brands that were once available exclusively online can now be found on traditional retail store shelves. Mike, is omni-channel retail now the way to go for most startup consumer brands, do you think?
Yes and no. I'd say no for startups because, I'm a huge advocate of using D2C to sort of hone your offer, to hone your product, develop your brand. D2C just gives you a really great opportunity to do that without spending a huge amount of money. But beyond that, yes, omni-channel and multi-channel is really important. The landscape's changed. 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, digital advertising costs were low. There wasn't that many D2C companies around. Look at Casper, for example. They were really the first mattress in a box D2C company, and they worked out for every dollar they spent on Facebook, they were given $7 or $8 in return. That was fantastic. And this is why, the VC community got so excited. But what has happened over time is just competition. So more and more people have come into the space. And that means it's not only a problem in terms of your brand, you've now got lots of competition. You've got lots of other companies who are vying for the same customers as you. That competition has also hugely driven up the cost of acquisition. So what that's meant for brands is actually they now have a scaling problem. It's hard to scale to either the level they need to be to become profitable or the level they need to meet the requirements or the promises they made to their investors. So that means they need to branch out beyond D2C to find more customers. And you know what? That's perfectly okay, because one of the really great interviews I had in the book was Anthony Fletcher from Grays, who told me it's crazy that more D2C brands are not doing multi-channel, because not only are there more customers to serve, it's actually, you work out there's just better ways to serve those customers as well, so you can become a better and stronger business. So yes, I think multi-channel, omni-channel is going to continue to be the way that most brands operate. But isn't that great? Because, as a brand, you've got the choices. You can do D2C, you can do third-party marketplace, you can do retail, you can do direct, so you can have your own shops. There's more opportunities to build the business that you want to build.
One of the best known brands in the DTC space, as you mentioned, is Casper, the mattress company, which was once valued at over $1 billion. Now, although it listed on the NASDAQ in 2020, after 18 months of losses, Casper was taken over by a private equity firm. For the direct-to-consumer playbook, you interviewed Jeff Chapin, one of the original co-founders of the company. So, Mike, I'm curious, how did you secure that interview? And what are some of the most important lessons you think we can learn from Casper's experiences?
It was great to talk to Jeff and hear his view on Casper, because I do believe, when the history of D2C is written in 50 years' time, Casper will be one of the brands that are mentioned. They were real sort of trailblazers and pioneers, and it was great to hear the whole story from Jeff. Yeah, in terms of how I got that interview, like I got most of my interviews really from founder networks. I was lucky that as a founder that I knew quite a lot of the people I interviewed firsthand anyway. And then there was only 1 or 2 degrees of separation between the rest. So it was, again, another advantage of being a founder. So, Jeff was really kind to spend quite a lot of time with me actually and talk through the Casper story. And one of the things that he said is they spent lots and lots of money provided by the VCs, because they had some really decent valuations. It meant they could get a lot of money from VCs without being diluted too much. So it seemed like, why wouldn't you do that? But what in the end, they actually spent all that money on marketing, and that was marketing to try and stay ahead of the competition. In the book, I mentioned that there wasn't 1 or 2 competitors. I think in 2019, we got to a number of 176 mattress in a box D2C companies in the US. I mean, that's a crazy number. And as Jeff told me, if you needed to try and outspend 5 competitors, if you needed to try and keep going longer than those 5, you could probably do it. But when you've got 200 or 500, it's like whack-a-mole. You spend a bit of money, one disappears and the next one pops up. It makes life really hard. And I think where Casper got into trouble is they took on the strategy of, we were the first, we are the best, we want to stay top of the pile, and they spent a lot of money to try and achieve that, where in effect they should have been investing more of that money into new product development, new channels in terms of business infrastructure. And I think they've got that now. And I think one of the reasons that they have been bought by private equity and taken private again is because they got them at a really good value. Because Casper they make great products, they've got a really strong brand, so there is definitely still value there. What Casper and the management team failed to do over the years is turn that opportunity into profit. So hopefully they can do that now. For those of your listeners who might have come across Adam Grant and his book Originals, there was a great chapter in there about the fallacy of the first mover advantage. As a first mover, whoever's following you can actually learn not only from your opportunities, from your mistakes. And it sort of makes it's easier to follow than it is to lead. And I think, Casper sort of led such a dynamic marketplace for so long. It wasn't hard for some of the competitors to catch up, and it caused them a marketing problem to stay ahead. Jeff was great. And I'm a fan of the business still, especially their branding. I love their attitude to customer service as well. Have a read in the book in terms of how they approach that. But did they make all the right decisions at the right time? Probably not, but they're still going and they're still learning.
The direct-to-consumer playbook has been out for a couple of months. So, Mike, what kinds of responses have you had to the book so far?
The book launched at the start of May in the UK and at the end of May for the US and the rest of the world. So I've been getting some responses from the UK market, and it's been going great. In the last month, it's been number 1 on the Amazon marketing chart. So, that was just great to see. And also, I've been getting some really nice professional feedback in terms of endorsements for the book, but also, really importantly now, it's actually from people reading it and trying to use it. The book was written, to be helpful for entrepreneurs. So when an entrepreneur sort of jumps on Amazon or either gives me a review and says, look, this is just a really helpful book. That's the main thing. So now I'm just really interested in terms of how it translates to international markets, and particularly the US. There's US brands in the book. Hopefully it's easy for any of the readers, wherever they are, to relate. And I think, D2C being sort of what it is, the fundamentals of D2C are the same, whether you're in Boston or Brighton in England or Bangalore or Bahrain or wherever, it's the same stuff. So yeah, I'd be really keen now to hear what international readers think of it.
And Mike, what are you working on right now?
So after selling my business, I've been doing two things. One has been writing the book, and the second is I consult. I also mentor, I advise, I write articles. I love consumer goods and especially challenger brands. It's really what I've been doing for 20 plus years. So I'm really happy to interact or help anyone who's trying to do something new with a physical product. So anyone who's listening to this who needs any help, you should come and check me out.
And how do you see the direct-to-consumer landscape evolving over the next 2 to 3 years?
I mean, I think D2C will continue to be harder for sort of new entrants, and that is only because it's so competitive. But there are things that are getting easier. Firstly, there's so many more great tools that a D2C company can use. I mean, even when we started, Shopify wasn't really around. We didn't use Shopify for the first sort of 3 or 4 years we were doing D2C. But the tools like Shopify and Klaviyo are just fantastic for creating an ecosystem you can use to get going. Then it's making sure that you've got the right products and the right marketing messages. That's really up to you, but the tools are there. I also do think in the next few years we will see a correction in digital marketing costs. And the reason I say that is it's about supply and demand. I think as more and more businesses realize that they're not getting the right returns from digital marketing, cost of acquisition is just actually higher than they can support. And more brands will be looking at sort of a different marketing mix. And that will mean, demand will go down on those channels. So I think, the costs will come down. Whether they will be as effective or not as they have been in the past, we will see. But I do think that there will be a correction there.
Mike, if In Clear Focus listeners would like to learn more about you and your services, where can they find you?
Yeah, so a good place to start would be if you're into D2C would be the book. So that is available, and I know you're going to share some links, Adrian, so thank you for that. But in terms of getting in touch with me personally, which I love, so please do, you'll find me on Twitter, and my handle is OpenMikeStevens. My website is stevens.earth. And also, I'm quite active on LinkedIn as well. So Mike J. Stevens, or just search Mike Stevens, Direct-to-Consumer Playbook, or Mike Stevens Peppersmith. You're sure to find me.
And if you'd like a copy of the Direct-to-Consumer Playbook, you can save 20% when you purchase directly from the publishers online at koganpage.com. Just add the promo code BIGI20 at the checkout. Mike, thank you very much for being our guest this week on In Clear Focus.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks to my guest this week, Mike Stevens, an expert in scaling direct-to-consumer brands and the author of the Direct-to-Consumer Playbook. As always, you'll find a transcript with links to the resources we discussed today on the In Clear Focus page at bigiagency.com. Just select podcast from the menu. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider following us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening to In Clear Focus, produced by Big Eye. I've been your host, Adrian Tennant. Until next week, goodbye.